Since 1983, FAME has helped business and education work for Maine. Contact the authority, the Finance Authority of Maine.
Welcome. This is our Afterthoughts segment where we keep our guests around from our broadcast program, and we have some continued discussion, hopefully a little more in-depth and candid discussion of the issues. Today we're talking about the worker misclassification issues in Maine, and with us we have Laura Fortman, Commissioner of Maine Department of Labor, Michael Bourque, Director of Corporate Communications for MEMIC, Steve Minkowsky, Deputy Director of Benefits Administration for the Workers' Comp Board, and Kathleen Newman, President and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors of Maine. Thanks for sticking around. Sorry that went so fast. Boom, I told you to go fast.
I thought there'd be cocktails for this after.
Yeah, you thought, oh really? You thought this was a real kind of dark cocktail? No, that's not. That's another show. Okay, I want to follow up on some of the stuff we were talking about during the show, and I wanted to start off with, we finished the kind of, I'm going to back up. I'm going to back up and do the overall piece first, and then we'll come back more to the specifics of the workers' comp piece. You were mentioning, Commissioner, about that kind of the issue of confusion on the ABC test, the IRS issues, the workers' comp piece, and you were mentioning that, and I think it was some of the recommendations in the task force report about how you will start working on coordinating this. Talk a little bit more about that.
Although I do believe that people should understand the tests. One of the things that we did was say, if there was general agreement about this 12-part test, what we would do at the Department of Labor is continue to apply our ABC test, but alongside of it we would also do the 12-part test as a pilot and then look at the results of that and see were there things that were turning up that normally would not have turned up using just the ABC test, or were there things that were falling through the cracks using the 12-point test that in fact made it important for us to stick to the ABC test.
Okay. And the reason that I think that could be problematic, and I read about it in the Governor's Task Force report just a few weeks ago, I guess, and sort of thought, well, if you're applying the 12-part test and the new form doesn't require that contractor to explain who he's working for, the ABC test's B prong doesn't allow a person who's working in the concrete industry to hire a concrete independent contractor. That person would always be considered an employee if they're in the same line of work. So since the 12-part test doesn't actually tell you if they're working for somebody in the same line of work, it's going to be hard to know if they would have failed the ABC test.
Okay, let me ask for anybody. I mean, the last time I checked, there were 50 states. And has anybody else worked this out? Are anybody further along than us? Are all states kind of battling the same issue?
Most states are moving toward using the ABC test as the standard that they're using across the board. If they're going to one test, that's the test that's the most popular. And there is
federal legislation that's been kicking around for a couple of years now, and I don't know that there's been any action on it recently, but I mean, that may be the better way to do it, and incorporate the IRS test. And
the other things that are happening at the federal level, though, is that the IRS has determined that this is an issue and that there is a greater scrutiny to look at misclassification, and they have entered into agreements with the local workforce agencies, so whatever agency in the state does unemployment insurance, to share information. So there is general agreement on the federal level, on the state level, nationally, that this misclassification is an issue.
But go ahead.
And I would just say, from our perspective, we want the line too. We really want to be able to know, because we spend a lot of time. Our insurance agents spend a lot of time, and employers spend a lot of time going, okay, I'm not sure where I fit, and then they'll say, well, wait a minute, am I under the ABC? I'm under the 12-part. What is it? And so I think whatever we could do ultimately to get to something that was uniform would be great. Getting there is always difficult.
Yeah, we don't want it to be a full employment bill for attorneys and accountants, because they're getting a lot of work. Okay, and the issue of one standard, I mean, that's also, you're exploring that, and in fact, you were talking about your unemployment division auditors, they will be doing a pilot using the 12-part?
They are. They started in January using this so that we can assess it. And items like Kathleen pointed out may be things that surface as a result of this, but then that gives us more information to continue to have the conversation with.
Well, where do you predict that's going to end up? Are we going more to that? Could there be a one-part?
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, we've had several pieces of legislation to try and change the ABC test. There was a couple of years ago, but there's never been sort of a focused effort to come up with one definition for each of the different agencies, and that would be a pretty significant piece of legislation, I would imagine. But we're willing to work on that. I think that's the way that we need to go.
I think that what we can't lose sight of, though, because as Kathleen said, we've been having these conversations for many years, but the instances of misclassification continue to escalate, so we can't lose sight of the fact that we need to enforce current law, and that that unless we do that, we're hurting workers, and we're hurting employers who are playing by the rules, as Michael pointed out, that they're being underbid by
that race to the bottom.
Right.
But I would say, though, that in the last 1 year, we've made a very significant change, particularly in the construction industry, which is where most of the problems appear to be. And we can say that it's been escalating, but we don't know what the impact of the recently passed 12-part test will be. And I think it will be a significant reversal of some of the people that have been doing things wrong and not realizing that they were doing it wrong. I mean, there are a lot of very unique work arrangements. I've been speaking in the Mid-Coast area, and particularly, you know, the question is, here's my brother and I work together. One day it's his job, and the next day it's my job. Is he my employee? You know, those sorts of things. And when they go through the scenarios, you did the same thing, Mike. And I think you went up too, Steve. Yes. It was. Every scenario is very unique.
And I want to get back to the workers' comp, but one more question for you, Commissioner, because it's another good way to dispel it, is we talked about you didn't crank up the audit knob, it's just still at 2%, but there was a focus on construction because that's where the issues were. It seems to make sense too. But there's a feeling that the deficit situation that the state is in, is that driving any of this? I mean, $36 million, that's pretty tempting.
Because the primary areas that we've been looking at have really been around unemployment and workers' comp, and neither of those are impacting the general fund in any way.
Okay, good, that's right. I remember that. Okay, good. So you tell me this is a voluntary program, huh? So if I don't want to do this workers' comp predetermination thing, I don't have to?
That's correct, Alan. The Workers' Comp Act is very clear that the predetermination is a voluntary form.
Okay.
And that's the board's position. And in fact, the Labor Committee, when we revised the form, made it very clear to us to include the word voluntary on the top of the form, so that the parties that are filling it out know, in fact, that it is voluntary.
Okay. Breathing is voluntary. Right, still have to do it. Does anybody want to comment on that?
Yeah, no, I guess I would just.
You know, but I understand what you're saying. I just want.
I would add from our perspective, because we are asking that somebody who's insured with us, if they have subcontractors, that the subcontractor supply either proof that they have workers' comp insurance or that they have the predetermination. The reason we ask for that is because the new law assumes that they are, the subcontractor is the employee of that general contractor unless if they don't meet the 12 parts. The easiest way to show that you don't meet the 12 parts for most people is to do the predetermination. That's really the easiest way. I'm sure that they could bring in a box, fill a file box full of things and bring it in to their insurance agent, set it down and say, okay, here's proof that I meet all 12 parts. But really the easiest way is to do that predetermination.
And if I may,
go ahead, please.
It's important, though, to understand that in addition to being voluntary, it's rebuttable. So should that subcontractor be injured, there in fact can be a filed first report, a petition for award, and the hired agent may be involved in that case. And if there's no workers' comp insurance, now you're dealing with a situation where the employer doesn't have comp. The employee may win their case. Who's going to pay for those medical bills? Who's going to pay for the lost time benefits? Will that employer have the capacity to do that, or will that cost for that injured employee be shifted on to society?
Tell me, so it is one form. I don't do a form for every job. Or how does that work?
Well, there are different forms for workers' compensation.
Okay.
So the new one, the contractor, has been reduced from about 7 pages to about 3 pages of questions. We worked with all the stakeholders that
they had
were
3 years of taxes, tax
filing. On the original application,
is that still part of that?
No, it isn't.
Good.
That has been dropped, and in fact, that was dropped prior to the governor signing the new legislation.
Good. And how are your members and your policyholders with that? Are they
elated?
Good. I mean, you
simpler is better. I mean,
and you were able to work in this process.
Oh yeah,
that's
absolutely.
Good.
I mean, we worked very closely together. It was a really great collaborative effort and a unanimous report out of the Labor Committee, which is somewhat unusual.
Yeah.
It is.
And emergency legislation, so it went into effect the moment it was signed by the governor.
Good. Okay. Any final closing thoughts you'd like to put in?
No, anyone who's interested can go online and just see what we're doing at the Misclassification Task Force. There is a website. Just go to www.maine.gov/labor and you'll click on to Misclass.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.